Dharmaji.
Namaskar, Narada.
So tell us how it all began.
I got initiated in 1995 in Asheville, North Carolina. Now, complicated questions why, but there is a story, of course, for each one of us. There is a very unique story. Something that could give me an inkling that my life would go in a spiritual flow was when I was 3 years old. I remember actually drawing a swastika on by a lake in my kindergarten, and I was it's as if it's yesterday. I remember thinking how the swastika would turn, and I would draw it one way, then I would wipe it out, and I would draw it another way, and I remember being punished, and my grandparents who were in the resistance fighting the Nazis, and they were cold, and they had to give me a talk about swastikas. But very shortly after the swastika memory, I was again maybe less than 4 years old. I remember the other kids would be always playing, and I was interested in lying on the grass and tracing the clouds and thinking. And I remember this very vividly, thinking of the meaning of life and what does it mean to be happy? Where does permanent happiness come from? And these were the thoughts in my mind. And I remember the teacher came to me and kind of leaned over me and started asking me questions. I remember thinking, am I very different from the other kids playing? But later on, this kind of questions would come constantly in my mind before going to bed. And very spiritual ponderings. Even as early as I was 6, 7, I would wonder, why am I not satisfied after I get a gift for too long? What am I looking for in my life? So I think this maybe to me explains the why of in each one of us there is the samskara of spiritual life and thirst, and it starts very early, and many of these memories start very early. And to me, I was not interested in a material life, in materialistic life, and I knew that there was a bigger spiritual force guiding each one of us and me and protecting me. And I always looked for it. The actual story of how I came to Ananda Marga is quite interesting also. I had a, so to speak, near-death experience where I decided to stop by the side of the road very late at night to help a vehicle, stranded vehicle, and the people in the vehicle pulled a gun. It was very late at night with nobody around me, and they pulled a gun and they tried to basically shoot me, and I barely escaped. This is the first time I had such a almost losing my life experience. And so I came back shaken, and when I got back home, and I looked at the telephone number of whom to call, and the only number that was there was of a Margi sister who kept inviting me to Dharma chakras, and I always refused. But I was so shaken that I called her, and she said, well, there is actually a Dada coming. Why don't you come and learn meditation? So I immediately, the next day I was at Dharma chakra, and I stepped in, and I remember turning in and seeing the quote by Baba, sadhana is the transformation of limited love or fearful love into fearless love. Or was it a limited love into limitless love? I believe it was the fearful into fearless. And I remember stopping in my tracks and really letting this sink in. And then I turned and saw Baba's picture. And it was as if, and this was a small trailer. This was the Chagati of by Valmiki's house in Asheville. And I remember just seeing Baba's picture, and it was as if it was one of these moments that you know your life will change. And that's when I felt this rush of energy, and I had to sit down and actually close my eyes, and I didn't even know I was meditating. I had not been initiated yet, but it was as if this stream of memories and experiences flooded my consciousness. And I remembered being 3 years old and drawing the swastika, trying to understand how to draw it, tracing the clouds. And then suddenly these words came, the fearful into fearless love. And then Baba just looked at me straight, and it was my first experience with Baba. I lost an idea of time. At that time, people were already singing kirtan, and I didn't know, I was not properly introduced at all. I didn't know what was happening, but I was just lost in this experience with this man in front of me with big eyes. And I knew at that point that my life would change forever. And it did. It really did. But that's how that is how I got initiated. That same day, Dada Vimarishwananda, he sat with me and he gave me my name right there. I think he felt I was ready. I had resisted for so long to come to Dharma Chakra before, and Baba needed this experience to really create a big clash in my mind, to feel like I was living my second life virtually. And I came with my ego completely stripped and completely feeling in very, very vulnerable. And that is how I started on my spiritual path. And from then on, it was as if I jumped in a very fast-moving creek, and my life rushed forward.
So, and after you got initiated, what sort of involvement did you have with Ananda Marga? Did you do any LFT training or do any particular work for Ananda Marga?
Yes, I did become LFT shortly after being initiated. I knew that I would like to basically know the mission more and dedicate my life to it. This was shortly after having also several very mystical experiences with Baba. And that's where it started with me feeling that I was extremely unfortunate, because I had come to Ananda Marga, even though I was very happy that I found Ananda Marga very early in my life. I was 25, but I was very unfortunate that I had not met Baba personally. And I was very sad. For the first several months of being initiated, I felt very much like I had missed the train. And then shortly after developing this very strong, I would say, spiritual longing, I had a couple of experiences that I would share here. There were more than this, but the most significant were, well, the first one was a very strong samadhi experience. I was massaging Dada Devashwarananda. Devashwarananda was an SS. Of course, many of you know him, and he came to Asheville to spend his last days before leaving his body because of his physical condition. And I decided to spend many days taking care of him and cooking for him and massaging him. He was in a lot of pain in his last weeks. And I remember one day he asked me for a massage, and I put my hands on his shoulders, and I remembered right there a dream I have had the previous night. And it was a dream of me and Baba walking on a trail, my favorite trail, and we were walking hand in hand, and there was nobody else. And it was a feeling like nothing I had experienced before. It was just me and Baba in the whole world, and we would look at each other as we were walking, and there was so much love pouring from him. And we walked very, very fast, yet very, very slow. And then he suddenly stopped. We walked for a very long time, and it was as if I was on a date, not a romantic date, but a profoundly high level of spiritual date and devotional date. And he turned to me and he said, and I would never forget it, he said to me, "And you should massage me more often." And I remember just holding his hands and looking deep into his eyes and remembering this, "You should massage me more often." And I remember, and as I put my hands on Dada Devasharananda, it's as if I lost completely an idea of time. And I must have been standing there with my hands on his shoulders for such a long time that when I came back after this mini samadhi experience, I came back to my body and I looked down, and Dada is looking up at me and smiling and not saying anything. And then suddenly he said, "It looks like somebody enjoyed this massage more than I did." And we laughed. We had of course, a very nice moment of sharing. But this is where I would say this kind of dream for a very long time, I would feel this incredible closeness and this message, these words of Baba, "You should massage me more often." And to me, it became a very deep understanding that by massaging him, that I massage him by doing service. By doing service to others, I have the opportunity to also massage him and to be close to him. And I understood this simple dream and this simple experience with Dada Devasharananda fairly early, and I was fairly young. In retrospect, I recognize how fortunate I was to have these kind of experiences, because they reoriented my entire life from living it selfishly to living it for Baba, for the mission. And another dream that very, very much impacted me, because it was a very vivid dream, was of me and several others walking up a mountain, and suddenly a big storm came and completely started sweeping through the mountain. And I remember us rushing up, and I threw myself. We were walking behind Baba. We were actually following Baba, and Baba was walking faster and faster up the mountain. And we threw ourselves forward, and I grabbed onto Baba's feet. And then I remember in the middle of the storm, it's as if everything froze, and he turned and looked at me and he said, "Hold on to my feet." And then suddenly all hell broke loose and everything started shaking. And I remember in the middle of this incredible chaos, I was just holding on to his feet with these several other people that I couldn't recognize. And we were and I felt safe. And I felt safe. Everything was shaking, but I felt extremely safe. And so I remember this dream is what gave me in the next years as an LFT this kind of dreams and spiritual closeness to Baba gave me this incredible thirst and very deep, profound realization that I want to live a life that is a spiritual life, that I want to please Baba. I want that everything I will measure with these standards, that actually social standards, the social norms to me are secondary, and the primary norms that by which I would live my life will be the spiritual norms. And I remember with this kind of experiences that they intensified in my first years, and I started feeling guided in a very fast-moving stream to a life that became very ideological. And within 5 years, I became an LFT, and I remained LFT for 5 years until from 2004 until 2010. And I really wanted to feel like an extreme of poverty, an extreme of suffering. And I wanted to test myself also to the max, because this was my biggest question: would I become an acharya? Is my samskara to become an acharya? And I asked Baba, I want you to test me to the maximum. I want to be pushed to the maximum. So the assignment that I got was Haiti. And Haiti at that time was extremely, and especially now, in many years of its history, has been an extremely difficult place to live in and work in. I remember, landing from the point I landed from the plane, on the plane, and stepping in the first slum that nobody was there to meet me on the airport. And I remember going in a country that I did not speak the language. Nobody came to meet me. I'm in a uniform, orange and white LFT uniform. I'm the only white person in a sea of very friendly people, but extreme poverty, with trash burning, with people living in little boxes, in a labyrinth of streets. And I remember stepping in this labyrinth, and I remember going again in samadhi, and just feeling completely safe. And this is a time when Aristide was being there was a coup d'etat. There were a lot of kidnappings. There were gangs, and it was extremely violent time. And I still remember feeling like I was holding on to Baba's feet. I was in that dream, and everything was shaking around me, and I knew that it would be shaking even more. And I was holding on to Baba's feet, and I was only thirsty to massage him. That's all I wanted in my life. And I knew that as long as I do this, I will be I'll bring a smile to him, and I'll be happy. And from that moment, a series of experiences and events transpired in my life. And to me, this was a period of extreme spiritual growth and coming closer and closer to Baba in a way that I felt I was fortunate. I was not anymore unfortunate that I did not meet him. Actually, I was extremely fortunate. And I was fortunate to be in the poorest country of the Eastern Hemisphere, of the Western Hemisphere. And I was fortunate to experience tremendous tremendous experiences of clash and suffering, and in them I managed to develop even deep from my relationship with Baba.
Can you explain some of your experiences working with Amurt in Haiti?
These were the most informative, I would say, the most incredible years of my life, and I would say probably that strong realization that I had as a kid, that I had that there was a higher spiritual force guiding me. It suddenly transformed into a feeling of complete surrender. Haiti for me became the perfect personal background to establish myself spiritually and to build my character through sacrifice and perseverance. And almost any encounter I had, there became an opportunity to throw myself and to confront plenty of internal and external clash, and to develop stronger mental focus and spiritual discipline, but also to become closer to Baba. And I had numerous very deep spiritual experiences doing service, working for Amurt. One of them, for example, is I remember being in the middle of a community forum in this village, and I was facilitating a conflict between many villages, and I remember being in the middle of this sea of very turbulent emotions, and people were shouting at each other. There were some people with machete, and they were talking about very deeply accumulated animosity between communities. And I remember closing my eyes and going deep inside and feeling this incredible closeness with Baba, but almost to the point where I lost myself completely. And I remembered I relived my dreams and my experiences with Baba. And I remember everything suddenly becoming very quiet and all the noise going away. And after some time, I came back down to myself and to the surrounding, and I came to a completely different place. It's as if everyone suddenly became quiet. They had put away their machete. People started actually closing their eyes themselves. And I remember feeling a vehicle for something much greater. And by going deep inside and by holding on to my relationship to Baba, this could transform other people's energies as well. Another similar time was driving in a car in the middle of a very, very poor section of Port-au-Prince. And suddenly I see all the traffic turning around and driving like crazy. And I see ahead of me a big sea of people, very angry people with weapons and throwing rocks. And I remember suddenly the car ran out of gas. And I remember that I was driving in my last gallon of gas. And I was with a little boy next to me that lived in the Jagati. And I remember telling him, okay, now is the time to meditate. And I closed my eyes and I held his hand, and he closed his eyes. And I just went deep, deep inside and started ideating on Baba. And Baba's love poured inside the entire car. It felt like we were in a little bubble. And I remember not hearing any of the commotion outside. Everything suddenly again quieted. And I remember knocking on the window, and I opened my eyes finally, and I looked around, and I see these young teenagers around me, and they're all armed with homemade weapons, and they're dressed like pirates, and they look they look a little bit like little evil pirates, and they're looking at me very intently, as if trying to penetrate this bubble. And we had this moment where we just would meditate, and they would knock on the window, and I would just go deep in meditation, and then they began imitating me, and it was as if the violence had turned into curiosity. What was suddenly this white foreigner doing with a little Haitian boy doing with closed eyes? And they were trying to understand, I feel. And so I kept meditating, and just going deep inside. And I remember I opened my eyes, and I remember some of them, they had formed a circle around the car, and some of them were also meditating. This is the most amazing thing to me. The big crowd had moved on already, and we were already left behind. And who stayed behind is just a few, maybe 7 or 8 of them stayed behind. Most of them drawn by curiosity, and some of them sat down and actually started imitating us, and they started meditating. And to me, I rolled down the window after a while, and by then my Creole was very basic. And then they came over, and we started actually exchanging words, and they guided us outside of this neighborhood, and they said, this is not a safe neighborhood. You need to get out of here as soon as possible. And they said, we'll show you a shortcut. And they actually guided us out. The car miraculously started. I turned the engine, and then they guided us out of the neighborhood, and we went back to the Jagarti.
Even though you had no petrol.
This is exactly, we had, and I remember arriving in the Jagarti, and the car again died. And this was one of these.
Talk about Baba's grace.
Yes, completely. Another very, very traumatic experience, actually, that marked me until today is my recovery after a very bad motorcycle accident. Within 2 years of my LFT service, and being operated in a very, very poor, almost military-style conditions, and nobody knew I was being operated, nobody from the mission. And I was allergic to penicillin, and the doctors injected me, of course, with penicillin. And I remember going in anaphylactic shock, and being left in this very, very unhygienic quarters in what turned out to be almost 5 hours. I was left to die. And I had this near-death experience that was extraordinarily traumatic, but also extraordinary spiritually vibrating me for many, many years to come. And I remember leaving my body and floating through the different rooms in the hospital and trying to remember my mantra. I remember just holding on to my mantra and trying to remember what it was, and forgetting it, and holding on to just Bhavanam Kevalam. And all I could remember repeating to myself was Bhavanam Kevalam, Bhavanam Kevalam. And I remember knowing that I'm a sliver away from leaving this old, painful body and existence and going into this vibrational world, and which moved by completely different rules. Overnight, my beard and my hair started turning white. And I remember this experience aged me. It lost my fear of death. And for many months after that, I would touch trees or people, and I would feel very strong vibration. I was still in a vibrational shock, so to speak. But also, this kind of experience helped me understand deeper the meaning of the Supreme Command and what Baba wanted us, why he wanted us to be disciplined with our practices, what it meant to actually repeat the Supreme Command every time. And I recognize that each one of us, and including me, at the time of leaving our body, we would have this opportunity to just slip out of this body and go into a vibrational world, which will be guided by our mental flow and our spiritual thirst, and that's when we'll be able to either let go of our attachments or be burdened by them. And I felt this kind of experience developed even deeper thirst for me to please Baba and to come close to him and to basically live my life in a very in a way that would prepare me for spiritual experiences rather than materialistic experiences. Probably another very deeply transformative experience was the earthquake, I would say. And I have been through several very big natural disasters, but the earthquake in 2010 was nothing that I was prepared for. And ironically, this was the year that I had decided I will either become an acharya or I will stop my LFT service. And that's the month that I made this vow that actually the earthquake struck. And in a matter of days, I was confronted with hundreds of thousands of people that had died, and literally piles of bodies all around me. And I remember living in a tent next to a school that had still kids buried underneath the concrete, and I could still hear the mourning of kids below concrete. And this experience was extraordinarily traumatic, but luckily, again, not luckily, but I felt Baba, and that's when I had a series of realizations very deep that Baba had personally prepared me through this near-death experience in the hospital where I had to confront my own death. And through the experiences before, I had gotten somewhat prepared to jump in and in a very tantric circumstance to try myself as a spiritual soldier, to really serve Baba in a way that would still keep my mental strength and morality, and I would not let this incredible negative samskara pull me down. And in retrospect now, I recognize this was a moment, an extraordinary moment that again proved to me the force of our ideology and practice and the force of devotion, that when you're guided by these, it's as if an umbrella opens up and protects you, and you're just there to serve, you're there as a vehicle, and you just, even in the midst of this tremendous pain and suffering, you can feel beauty, you feel love, you feel devotion. And so it's not just, to me anymore, these are not anymore stories or books. It is life as I experienced it, in a way that I never thought that would unravel, but it helped me really feel incredibly thankful and not anymore unlucky that I did not meet Baba, but lucky with this realization that Baba actually is very much with us, with me personally. It's Baba is guiding me every single second, and we have tremendous opportunity to serve humanity, to serve our mission, to transform it, to transform both our mission and humanity. And with this thankfulness, it comes this responsibility that we don't live our lives for ourselves only, we live our lives for him. And we have a very short life to live before we move on.
Thank you, Dharmaji.